So now, it's time to talk about the F word. That's right, feminism. Well, where do I start with this one? I guess I could refer you to the same definition that every feminist tells me when I say I'm not a feminist or I'm against feminism, which they say, well, feminism is for the equality of men and women. But when you talk to feminists, the reality of the situation shows itself to be very different from that definition. There are a few feminist issues and talking points that feminists will usually have one or more of when you start really talking to them. First on the list, patriarchy, feminism's mythical boogeyman. Second, the gender wage gap, which has been debunked thoroughly several times over. In fact, where they get the numbers for, say, 77 cents on the dollar comes from an overall number from the Census Bureau, where they don't take into account the different choices that both men and women make in career fields. They don't take into account the type of work, the hours worked, nothing like that. And say that women get paid 77 cents on the dollar that men do, and that's it. But if you look at DOL numbers, Department of Labor numbers, it turns out that men work 5-6 hours longer per week. I mean, you translate it over, how many days is that in a year that they work more? Hell, I mean, even in a month, they'll work at least a day or two longer at that rate. And then the fact that 92% of workplace fatalities are men clearly indicates that the pay differences are not based on gender, but on career choices. Then we've got the DV, because feminists like to pretend that DV is not treated like a serious crime and that our culture just is all cool with that, even though it's not. And this mythical rape culture. Because rape is not a Class A felony in all 50 states. Oh wait, it is. Damn. And and it's not like anybody accused of rape's life isn't automatically over, when they're accused by the police. Or when somebody files a rape report on them to the police. Slut shaming, because, we've got to make it illegal for somebody's feelings to get hurt, right? Same with fat shaming. Institutionalized misogyny, even though, that doesn't exist. And in fact, if you look at our culture, it's quite the opposite. But what do you expect from a group of people that get their philosophy, their arguments, and their reasoning based on fiction, fantasy, and fallacy? 3 more F words synonymous with feminism. And the fact that they claim to speak for all women, including the women that say, no, you don't speak for me, no, I don't agree with what you're saying, they don't care. In fact, they treat those women who say that feminism doesn't speak for them just as bad, if not worse, than some males. But, I digress. Feminism has upset quite a few different communities. For good reasons. Those communities have every good reason to be upset for them. They will come into a community that they didn't build, that they weren't a part of building up, they'll come into a business that they don't really add any value to, and then demand a seat at the table and start demanding that that company or that community will be run according to their dogma. And this is why these communities don't really like them. This is why they pissed off these communities. But I don't speak for any of these communities. I don't speak for anybody else but myself. So, I will tell you the points about feminism that I dislike the most. First on the list, the fact that they're anti-free market. Many feminists who I've talked to claim to be Marxist. And in fact, you'll have a lot of feminists you can Google search, say Marxist feminism or feminism and Marxism, and you'll find that they're attached at the hip. But not only that, the only way to really solve this, quote, gender pay gap is to either A, force women into career fields that are higher paying that they don't like, such as working in the oil fields, fishing for crab up in Alaska, that sort of thing. Or it would be to just pay everyone the same across the board. And if that's the case, you know, stick these feminists out on the oil fields, stick these feminists out on crab fishing boats, put these feminists in rigs and have them do over the road driving, you know, commercially. See how fair they feel treated, making the same as somebody who's sitting in a classroom only working 9 months a year, getting the same salary, and getting to go home every night. Shoot, let's see. But that's my first issue with feminism, is how anti-free market they are. Marxism has failed. Socialism has failed everywhere it's been implemented. Communism has failed everywhere it's been implemented. You want a higher standard of living, you're going to go to a place where there's a free market. Well, let's take the example for Texas, you know, in the U.S. Most of the feminists I know who are in Texas are either from California or New York, and they're here because they can't find a job that pays them enough to where they can live on their own in their own home state. But here in Texas, they can. And then they have the gall to criticize us for being a backward state, because we're pro-business. They're anti-due process. Many feminists want a conviction based on an accusation of rape or DV thrown at a man by a woman. That goes completely against the principles of a just society that says, hey, before you can punish somebody, you have to prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt before society hands out a punishment or sentences somebody to a particular punishment for a crime that they have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they were guilty of that crime in a court of law, not one of the feminist kangaroo courts, and not administratively by one of their feminist deans. But even then, you know, a rape accusation, regardless if it's truth or not, tends to ruin a lot of people's lives. Now, I have no problem with that if that person is a rapist and they've been convicted of it. But when it's somebody who didn't commit the crime, feminists aren't rushing to that person's aid. They don't care. In fact, one feminist, and actually I'll put this in the link below, pretty much said men can learn a thing or two about being when being falsely accused of rape or something along the line. I'll put that quote So they're anti-due process. They're anti-firearm freedom and anti-self-defense. Their big claim is, don't teach women to protect themselves, teach men not to rape. Well, that's just like saying, don't tell me to lock my door, tell home intruders to stay out. That's like saying, don't tell me not to leave the keys in the ignition of my vehicle, tell car thieves not to steal. It's completely ludicrous, and it's completely based in fantasy. And moreover, all the major feminist organizations support gun control, which those of you who don't think I'm pro-gun control don't know me too well. They're against concealed carry in many cases. They're against owning certain firearms. They are very much pro-firearm registration. These are things that don't sit well with me. I carry one of these things around whenever legal for personal protection. And I encourage any good, sane, responsible person to do the same in accordance with their own state and local laws. And not just to protect yourself against rape, obviously, but we live in an imperfect world. And sometimes bad things do happen to good people. And that can be sometimes prevented through carrying the proper tools to protect yourself with. Moreover, many of these feminists, in fact, I think every single feminist I've talked to and gotten to know intimately, either dating them or whatnot, or talking to them in great length, has this victim complex. Nothing's ever their fault. They want to be seen as a victim. It's everyone else's fault. It's patriarchy's fault. It's this capitalistic society's fault. It's their previous husband's fault. It's their ex-boyfriend's fault. It's somebody else's fault but theirs. It's their boss's fault because their boss was discriminating against them for being a woman, or fired them for being sick. They never want to own up to their own choices in life. Now, I'll tell you, if I could go back in time and fix 5 specific mistakes I've made today, I would be worth at least 100 G's more, or $100,000 more in my net worth. You see what point I proved? I acknowledge that I made some mistakes in life. I acknowledged that if I could prevent myself from making those mistakes, I would be worth $100,000 more, at least. So, like a normal, rational human being, I can take responsibility for the mistakes I've made and understand what the mistakes I've made have cost me on this one. Feminists refuse to do that. And I've actually tested this out with quite a few feminists. I've asked them what they could have done differently in their life to where their situation would be better. They all give the same answer. I can't think of anything. No, I did everything right. And that's probably the biggest problem I have with feminists. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there are other demographics that do this too. There are quite a few other people in this world that will refuse to see what mistakes they've made. And guess what? They're having a hard time themselves. Alright. Y'all take her easy.